Support for this and all the free content of Addressing Gettysburg is made possible by our patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Good to see you all. As always, thank you for being here. My name is Christopher Gwynn. I'm Chief of Interpretation and Education at Gettysburg National Military Park. And it's my honor to welcome David Geister and Pat Bauer as our winter lecturers this afternoon. David is the illustrator of more than 20 picture books, including Storms Coming, Grandpa Allen's Sugar Shack, and B is for Battle Cry, a Civil War alphabet, written by his wife, Pat Bauer. He was honored by the Minnesota Council for Social Studies with the, quote, Friend of Social Studies Award in 2019. Dave is a frequent visitor to schools where he shares his passion for making art, creating stop-motion animation films, and playing with toy soldiers. I do that as well.
I bet a few people do.
Pat Bauer was a teacher for 38 years. She is the author of B is for Battle Cry, a Civil War alphabet, illustrated by her husband David. She was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Minnesota Council for Social Studies in 2017 and served on the Minnesota Task Force for the commemoration of the Civil War and the Minnesota World War I Commemoration Task Force. And along with Dave, she visits schools, libraries, and other venues to share her love and knowledge of history, literature, music, and art. But perhaps most importantly, David and Pat were both part of Gettysburg National Military Park's Artist in Residence program. Established in 2015, it has welcomed dozens of artists to the battlefield for month-long residencies. They stay in the historic Daniel Klingel home on the battlefield, and David and Pat were gracious enough to offer to return to share some of the work that was inspired by their residency last year. So it is my distinct pleasure to welcome both David and Pat.
We'll give this a try. See if we have to tweak it at all. Anything? Oops. All right, there we go. This log house on the Emmitsburg road, a young family's small abode. Daniel farmed and was a cobbler too. Hannah worked hard as the children grew. Apple and peach trees on their land, but life didn't turn out as they planned. General Lee marched his army north just a few days before July 4th. Hannah looked out the window to see soldiers with axes at great speed were chopping down fences to make their way. And this, my friends, was just the first day. Soon men in gray covered the floor. The family gave them water, but they needed much more. No doctors to be found, so the dead were laid out on the ground. Why did this war come to our farm? How can we keep our children from harm? Everything's gone up in smoke, all of our dreams and all of our hopes. The year was 1863. The family was ordered to leave, but Daniel refused to go, saying, if I'm to die, I'd rather die at home. But the soldiers forced them to run. The men in blue, they shot their guns on pictures were so peaceful and calm, and obviously that's not what happened on the 2nd of July first, second, and third, actually, there was a lot going on there. We may have been some of the happier people to have lived in that place. We were there for 4, close to 5 weeks, which was just such a gift to have that time to be creative and to not have a lot of distractions other than wonderful people and beautiful sights all around there.
Here, here. Speaking of which, can you hear? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Well, I know we have a number of licensed battlefield guides and other experts here, but for the folks who don't know where the Klingel House is, it's the big red dot on the map here on the Emmitsburg Road, and not too far from the Sherfy Farm, the Beech Orchard, and actually not that far from the Trossel Farm as well. And as Minnesotans, it was important for us to be there because it's the path that Wilcox's Alabama Brigade took before they slammed into the 1st Minnesota on the evening of July 2nd. And that path literally went right through the Klingel Farm. So for us, it's an important part of that Minnesota story. How many of you have ever been in the Klingel house before? Raise your hand. Okay, there are a few of you have. All right, excellent. Yeah. We did
We thought we'd put a few pictures together.
Right, yeah, because most folks haven't seen inside it. And obviously it didn't look like that during the battle. I can tell you, and we were joking about this a little bit earlier, when you wake up in the morning and step out of this bed, especially from the far side, you feel as though you've had too much to drink and you tumble towards the wall because things have settled a little bit. But it was an extremely comfortable place for us as artists and residents. I don't always look quite like that, but actually I do more often than I care to admit. But that was a small working space. Let me rephrase, it was an intimate working space as a painter. But it worked out just fine. And for me, the big treat was to be able to look out that window and see what was in my backyard, which varies greatly from what I get in South Minneapolis.
Maybe before you go on to more of that.
Yes.
The house was built in 1828 by a man named Ludwig Essig, who was a German immigrant. One day during our time here, I was walking up on top of Little Round Top, and I met a gentleman, in his 60s, about my age, and his son, and they were visiting from Missouri. And we got to talking, and they said, oh yeah, the main reason we came is because one of our ancestors built one of those houses down there. I said, oh yeah, which house? And of course it was the Klingel house. And they were descended from Ludwig Essig. And they were just so thrilled to come and visit and see those rough-hewn logs holding up the ceiling in the basement and being able to see the structure of that house that he had built. It was a pretty cool thing.
Just watching their faces when they reached up and touched those big timbers, and to feel the adze marks, you could just see, that was great. I mean, if we had any one experience from the whole 5 weeks that really stands out, that may be it. Although now there are a lot of other ones. Meeting Chris, for instance.
But the Klingels had moved in only 3 months before the battle. And, young couple, Daniel and Hannah, their 2 little ones. One was a few months old, one was like 3. And, just the thought of what they went through so soon, any time would be horrible. But here they had just moved, and these terrible things started happening, and they did get kicked out, and there were Union soldiers inside who would, busted out the windows and then chinking between the logs and were shooting out, and there were, dead and wounded soldiers everywhere. One of the things that I often encounter is everything's told from the man's point of view, like the woman wasn't even there. and which is one reason that I put in here that Hannah looked out the window to see, because I'm sure that she did. But so often it's the men did these things. Well, the women did so many of these things as well, and they were pregnant or they had little infants and they're worried about their children and they're trying to feed everybody, while all of this is going on. So that's one of the things I was, looking at somewhat when I was writing poems and songs.
Much needed perspective.
Okay, when we got here, I discovered that there were grapes that were ripe, and I can't let things go to waste. And just looking at the trellis, I think you can see that there used to be many grapevines, but it's down to one. But there were enough there for me to make 28 little jars of jelly. We just gave the last one away at the Twin Cities Civil War Roundtable last week.
Do you have any left, Chris, or is it all gone?
Pretty much gone.
Yeah, but it was just a cool experience, and that was the one time I put on my Civil War era work dress and got out there and picked the grapes.
And speaking of which, there they are. And I can attest that was fantastic jelly. It really was.
It was just very special to be able to do that. Yep.
There it is. That's a life-size picture. You guys growing big out here. But it wasn't just, wasn't just grapes.
No. Want to talk a little bit about Peach Orchard for a minute?
Sure. Well, the Peach Orchard, obviously plays sort of an important, iconic role in the Battle of Gettysburg. And we're sort of taken with the story of those men who fought there and then came back years later and visited the same ground, and in some cases met, say, Mrs. Sherfy. So this is a poem that Pat wrote about that. It's called, strangely enough, The Peach Orchard. I stand in the orchard under the trees. It's been more than a year. The peaches are ripe now, and juice runs down my chin. They were tiny and green when last I stood here. The house was riddled with holes then, the barn a pile of ashes, a blanket that covered men's bones. Bloated bodies, horses and human, littered the farmyard. I greet Mrs. Sherfy and tell her that I am the soldier who ordered her family to flee, wondering what she'd say. But she welcomes me with a smile and shows me her trophies. Tin cans of peaches, survivors of the battle, that she harvested and preserved. She hands me one, and I'm grateful. Back under the trees, I wonder, will there ever be enough raindrops to wash away the blood? Enough children's laughter to drown out the cries that still hang in the air? Enough sweetness from the ripe peaches to banish the stench of rotting flesh? Enough love and kindness to banish hate? Will my children's children's children stand where I am now and wonder how such horrors could have happened in this beautiful place? And that's the Peach Orchard.
And that's exactly the way we felt, and I'm sure you do. When you look around, you think, it's so peaceful and it's so beautiful, and the sunset, and yet when you think of the madness that happened, there's a lot of dissonance there. You can't quite, it's hard to wrap your head around it. At least for us it was.
Absolutely. So we encountered a lot of interesting people, a lot of really fantastic people. I keep mentioning Chris Army, who's one of the licensed battlefield guides here. And we had a chance to spend some time with folks over at the Seminary Museum, Darrell Black and Pete Bealey, I think. And we took advantage of any opportunity we could to get a tour from people, just to give us additional perspective on the battlefield. Jared Foos, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. One of the young guides, or one of the National Park Service guides or interpreters, took us on a wonderful private tour of the fighting on the edge of town, the civilian perspective, one night, and that was invaluable. It really, truly was. This is a battle that I've been reading about, well, quite frankly, since my grandmother introduced me to it. I remember opening up a door to her closet when I was perhaps in second grade. There was a stack of books, Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, and this little green beat-up book with a name I couldn't quite read, Gettysburg. I couldn't understand a lot of the words, but I could certainly understand the drawings in it. And this was a book by McKinley Cantor that is perhaps not great history, but great storytelling, and it hooked me. So I've spent much of my life thinking about what happened here, and yet it's always worthwhile getting somebody else's perspective. Oh, there's Chris in all his glory.
And that was in small town Wisconsin, by the way, that he was obsessed with Gettysburg.
Right, so I'm sort of an Iron Brigade boy. My men from my hometown charged into the railroad cut on the first day of the battle and paid a pretty big price for it. And then we live in Minneapolis, so we sort of get the first Minnesota connection too. So we feel connected to the battle largely because of that. But we did have friends come from back home to visit us. Quite a few, actually. In fact, how many? 27 or something like that?
From different places.
I had the same thing happen when I was stationed at Camp Pendleton 1,000 years ago. Everybody wanted to come out and visit Disneyland. So,
Not him necessarily.
Trek
yeah.
north from Pendleton to Disneyland, Disney World, Disneyland, all the time.
But
Anyhow.
what was wonderful is that this is the back of the house, and we would take the table, and then there are 4 chairs in the house, and we'd take them out through the front door and bring them into the back so that we could overlook, we're looking at the Pennsylvania Monument and the Minnesota Monument, yes. And, yeah. And it was just so wonderful to be able to sit out there again in this peace and quiet and contemplate and talk about what had happened at that place.
And if Diane knew that we had a picture of her in the midst of taking a bite, she would not be happy. These two folks are the ones who continually maintain the the urn.
The Minnesota urn.
In the cemetery. Yeah, they're friends of ours who have, once again, a very strong connection to this place. And a couple of more friends, all history folk. All of us have worked at historic Fort Snelling in 1820s costumes for years, and so that's sort of the connection for a lot of us history folk.
We're also
monster movie freaks, but that's not what you came here for, so we're not going to go down that path.
You can talk to him about that later.
But if you want, I'll give you a business card to our podcast. So. But this is what we're looking at, largely. That's part of the backyard. Looks like cavalry. The vedettes are coming in. Something must be going on out there with the beautiful, magnificent Pennsylvania. And then, of course, Minnesota is right next door.
Hiding there.
Yeah.
That was the last morning we were here.
Yeah, truly, absolutely, just beautiful, haunting sometimes. So, wow, it's fun to see it this size. Oh my goodness. So I painted this for the 150th anniversary, or the commemoration of the Battle of Gettysburg, and this is my interpretation of the 1st Minnesota charging into Plum Run against Wilcox's Alabama Brigade on the evening of July 2nd. Now, the original painting's only about 4 feet long, so it's kind of funny to see it this size. I like it this size. We brought it out here for the 150th anniversary, and we had to make sure it was the right size to fit in our vehicle, so it couldn't be any bigger than this. But what's kind of funny is maybe not the word you use when talking about this kind of, but in terms of our own connection to it, there's a little house on the Emmitsburg Road, and this was painted long before I'd given the Klingel house more than 2 thoughts. It just was a place on the road that the Alabamans fought past when they broke Humphrey's division and just happened to then come up against the 1st Minnesota a little bit later. So to be able to live in that house and have it turn up in the background of this painting it's kind of a thrill for me. I was explaining to a few folks a little while ago that as a history painter, which is part of my life, I have to make certain decisions, artistic decisions. Do I want you to see what's happening or not? So getting rid of all that smoke and trying to make sense out of the scene was something that I had to do. I doubt the real moment of the battle looked like this. But from a narrative standpoint, this was a way for me to talk to Minnesota school children about these 262 to 280 Minnesotans and the vast number of men from the state of Alabama that they come up against, you know. But this is something I've thought about ever since I heard my grandmother read part of McKinley Cantor's Gettysburg and the story in there about the first Minnesota. Yes, please.
Can you run your pointer along the flanks of the Confederate?
Sure.
That the first Minnesota is going against?
Right, so we've got, we've got the 11th Alabama here. We've got, and this is artistic license, I'm convinced. I've already pushed the 9th Alabama into the gap here a little bit. And I'm having trouble remembering, I think this is the 8th Alabama over here, but basically got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Alabama regiments who've been fighting across the Emmitsburg Road and the Klingel and the Rogers Farm. You see the remains of Humphrey's division out here, men being taken prisoner, guns overrun, so on and so forth. Cadmus Wilcox is right here. This is William Colville of the 1st Minnesota. I didn't put myself in the picture, which I sometimes will do largely because I am the cheapest and easiest model to work with.
Besides me.
Well, besides my, but if I need somebody to stand, you know, buck naked in the middle of the house at 2 o'clock in the morning, it better be me. So, I don't know why I felt the need to say that. I don't. It makes no sense to me either. Anyhow, there's a close-up. This is really funny because those guys are about the size of my thumbnail.
Yeah,
so
that's
I had
just
to wear, you know, I do a lot of military miniature work, and so you got these big green strap-on magnifying glasses, and you can bet I was wearing those, especially when it came time to do the bayonets and the sabers and whatnot.
Yeah, we've never seen it that big. That is
It's pretty
amazing
funny.
that it holds up like that.
And yet it has nothing to do with our artists and residents here. So let's move along. So this is, I hate to give away all my trade secrets, but years ago, before I really figured out what I was going to do, I had a good friend in a property in South Minneapolis put on one of my uniforms and take my original musket, and I said, Jack, just go crazy. You know, imagine there are Confederates over here and you're just doing all this stuff. So I shot probably 100 pictures of Jack. And then I just, for the fun of it, one night sat down and started picking and choosing I had this idea for the basic composition. You know, this is not an award-winning composition, folks, all right? I'd be the first to admit it. But I had some ideas about what I wanted to do with the lines, and I just had Jack do that, and then I put it away sort of in the back of my mind, and when we arrived here in September, I had decided that I wanted to sort of bring this to life, finally. So my challenge was to take these photos I'd taken of Jack and try to really, you know, up my game, do something with them. But I did start by transferring it over. I literally just printed this out on 11 by 17 paper, rubbed charcoal on the back, slapped it down on the canvas, traced it, and then started to redraw everything. And steady lad.
Explain.
Well, the reason we include this picture is essentially that, okay? So talk about inspiration, right? Normally I'm painting a winter scene in the middle of summer, or I'm painting a scene of, you know, Gettysburg in the middle of a, you know, Minnesota winter. So to have it all come together was really a unique experience. So that you can see I'm starting to change things a bit here, slowly but surely. And in its own way, this could have been kind of a fun painting. I could have stopped at that point, and it would have been, I think, kind of in fact, it might have had as much, if not more, energy than the final piece will have. Because I have a tendency to beat these things to death until there's no life left in them. I shouldn't say that stuff. But this is where it's at right now. And it's got a long ways to go. My wife just overheard me tell somebody it's about 1/3 of the way there, and she said, no, it's 2/3 of the way there. Because she knows that
Because it needs to get done.
it's got to get done, right? But there's a lot that'll happen.
Yeah.
But we brought in Tyler Greco, a young friend of ours who hand stitches. Anybody know Tyler Greco by any chance? Anybody out there? Yeah, there we go. All right, yep. Anyhow, so Tyler came over and gave me his best battle face. A great battle face. I swore I wasn't going to paint his shirt that way, though. So. And then we had Jared come over, and Jared had just given a presentation to a whole bunch of students from the big city, and he looked great. First of all, he's the right size, he's the right weight, he's like half my size, you know, and he was covered in filth, and his brim of his hat was turned up. So I put him through the paces for a while, and he also makes an appearance. And then we had other people, help paint. Even that, although this is really more the other scene I'll talk about in a moment here. But having the public put down spots of paint on the canvas is something I started years ago at the Minnesota Historical Society doing a World War I mural, and we've just sort of run with it. And it's been a blast. It does mean you have to sort of give up, any sort of pretensions about having control. I think Wendy probably could write volumes about this, right? This young girl here, this is B. She's the daughter of Darrell Black, and Dr. Black is the director at the seminary museum. Anyhow, and I'm not the only one painting in this picture. There was this crew out there. I even had a date with one of the guys. We were going to get together and paint. We were going to get together and sketch over at the Klingel farm, but things fell apart. He was one of the guys working on the buildings. Anyhow, so let's talk a little bit about William Colville.
Yes.
Chris, how bad are we doing for time?
You're just before 2 o'clock right now.
Okay, all right. We got to pick this pace up here. So, well, William Colville is the officer from Minnesota who led that regiment, the 1st Regiment, down the gentle slope into Plum Run, and he got knocked apart. He took 2 Confederate bullets that scarred him for life. But the men sort of had a love for him. He was big and gruff. He survived the battle, okay? And this odd device here is, in my opinion, one of the most fascinating artifacts we had in Minnesota at historic Fort Snelling, where I often had to portray the surgeon from the 1820s. But I would say, if you really want to see something interesting, go down the hallway here and look in this case. You're going to see this thing knocked together from pieces of hardtack boxes. And this is what stabilized the ankle, the shattered ankle of William Colville right after the charge at the Battle of Gettysburg. It saved his leg, otherwise he would have lost it. And after he'd spent some time there, he was eventually turned over to the care of a civilian family in Gettysburg.
Daly Pierce, who most of you are probably very familiar with. So we've known about her for a long time just because of our connection to the 1st Minnesota in Colville. So I had to write a song about her. Baltimore Street, her life was quiet till that July day when soldiers marched into Gettysburg town, and she was caught in the midst of the fray. Oh, Tilly, won't you go fetch water for the men? They've been marching since way before dawn. You are so young, on you we can depend to
The Taylor brothers are two, I think, of the more well-known members of the 1st Minnesota, one of whom was killed during the charge on the 2nd.
Isaac on the
Isaac,
right.
right. And for the longest time, I've been trying to figure out where would he have been buried, because I'd like to do a painting showing the aftermath, of the battle, and Patrick Henry having to bury his brother the morning after the charge, just a few hours before Pickett's charge happens. And so there were some very tantalizing clues in a few letters, not the least of which is this one. He's buried 350 paces west of the road, which passes north and south by the houses of Jacob Hummelbaugh and John Fisher, colored, at about equal distance from each and a mile south of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So I'm not the first person to try to figure out where these directions might necessarily lead you. But a number of folks chimed in, and this, by my estimation, is where he might have been buried, at least. That's the closest I can get. Those are my 350 paces on a very treacherous, uneven bit of ground. But it's along a stone fence, and at one point, Patrick Henry mentions sitting on the stone wall, to write in the diary. And so it all kind of makes sense. So one of these days, perhaps if we come back in 2021, this will be one of my goals, is to work on a painting, a very intimate painting showing Patrick Henry Taylor having just buried his brother, and then he has to write in the diary and then write a letter home to his family. And that way I sort of telescope down from the large battle scene that I showed you to the one that I've got behind me, and then finally we get down to the very intimate, the result of it all. So maybe in another year or two. And this is more or less the spot where I think he might have been buried. There are so many unanswerable questions at this point, so it's a best guess. You see the Pennsylvania monument there, and the Minnesota monument is right over there on the other side of that building in the tree. Dear?
All right. This song is from the point of view of a woman who could have been married to Isaac was not married, but who laments the loss of her loved one. I don't know why the sun is still in the sky, and please tell me why the moon hovers on high. The guns are all quiet now, but we must tell the tale, while the fireflies dance in the swale, while the fireflies dance in the swale. My sweetheart, he promised that he would come home, and I was foolish enough to believe him. 2 long years for him I did yearn, but now I know that he'll never return. I know that he'll never return. The first battle he fought was in a place called Bull Run. Just a few months after he left me, the men fought so hard, stayed long on the field, and showed just how brave they could be, showed just how brave they could be. At Yorktown he was sick from being out in the rain, but then he helped build a bridge in 4 days. He fought at Fair Oaks, Savage Station, and White Oak Swamp. When nary an hour was
was calm, nary an hour was calm. After Antietam, my sweetheart wrote me a note. He told the bodies piled high in the lane that winter a battle fought at Fredericksburg. He wrote the first shall never be deterred. No, the first shall never be deterred. My sweetheart scrawled a letter while on the march to a crossroads they called Gettysburg. The newspapers said the battle lasted 3 days. My dear one died in Plum Run, far away. Yes, he died in that swale, far away. And now I don't know why the sun is still in the sky. And please tell me why the moon hovers on high. The guns are all silent now, but we must tell the tale. While the fireflies dance in the swale, while the fireflies still dance in the swale.
Sketches. Part of the reason I came here on this artist in residence journey was to just get out and sketch. And to that end, I put together a kit. You can see it over here on the floor, attached to an easel. I basically put something together that allowed me to, almost at the drop of a hat, just set up and paint using watercolor and gouache, which I'm not all that familiar with. But it's much easier to use when you're painting out of doors as opposed to, say, oil paints. So here I am working on Gouverneur Warren. There's the sketch itself. It's really funny to see these this large. It's a little disconcerting, actually. Oh, there's Vincent, our grandson. He's just ordered the artillery to fire a round over distant woods, and he's waiting to see the glint on the bayonets. And Juniper's looking on adoringly. She must be his aide-de-camp. Here I am. Pretty exciting pictures, huh? But I was living for this. I mean, this was a very unique opportunity. Yeah, well, in fact, that is what led to that. That's right. That's what it is.
Bushman?
The Bushman farm. Right, and the Weichert farm, and the Trossel farm. And one of my favorite spots was just one of the Trossel farm lanes. It was just magical. It could be anywhere in American history in about a 300-year span. You know, separate and distinct from the battle in some ways. Very peaceful. Once again, that contrast between the peaceful feeling that the landscape itself evoked and then the horrible reality of what happened over that time. And then the last sketch, feeling a little sad that day, being kicked out of the park, sent back to the frozen tundra.
Well, not quite yet.
No, actually. We were actually roasted for a while back home. And there's my dear wife. While I'm messing around with a paintbrush, she's messing around with a pencil or a pen and coming up with wonderful pieces like the one she just sang now, which to me is very, very haunting. It's one of my favorites. Oh, and here's another one, which has its own separate and unique story.
Quick story here. At one point, there were so many different topics I could not focus on anything. I was like, oh no, what am I going to do here? And one night we were going to sleep trying to go to sleep, and there was a cricket in our bedroom. It was that you must have a different breed out here than we have in Minnesota. It was so loud for me.
It must have been like the size of a dachshund or something.
My husband's hearing isn't so good, and he didn't have his hearing aids in, so it didn't bother him very much. I finally got up and stuffed some toilet paper in my ears. I was laughing though, I mean, it was so funny, but I couldn't find this cricket, and it was really loud. So the next day I'm talking to my dear friend Dinah, who was recently widowed, which is why I really felt like I needed to do this song, because she said, boy, that sounds like a song. I said, okay. And then like 20 minutes later she called me back and said, she had the first few lines of a song and a little bit of a tune. She's not a musician at all. She doesn't sing. She helped design some of my jewelry that her husband made, so she's artistic. But it was just so cool that she did that. So anyway, I came up with this, envisioning again, probably maybe a 1st Minnesota Iron Brigade or someone who is far from home, and he's got this little cricket singing in his ear at night. 1, 2, 3. Let's see if I got that in the right place. Yes, I do. Wait. All right, here we go. Cricket, oh cricket, sing for me. You are my only company, only you and a sea of stars. This war has taken me so far away from my home. I am so alone. I miss my wife and my babes, my own. Cricket, oh cricket, sing for me. You are my only company. I remember when I was fancy free, and I'd go out dancing with my sweet Marie. But the president called and I had to go. Now I'm walking with my comrades down the road. I've got no more food in my pack, but if I did, I'd share my hardtack. Cricket, oh cricket, sing for me. You are my only company. Cricket, oh cricket, I've seen so much pain. I just hope that it wasn't all in vain. We've got to march further down the road, and we all carry such a heavy load. When we get to the crossroads, then we'll fight. I hope I live to see twilight. Then cricket, oh cricket, please sing for me. You are my only company, only you and a sea of stars. This war has taken me so far away from my home. I feel so alone. I miss my wife and my babes, my own. Cricket, oh cricket, please sing for me, because this war is now my destiny.
And we're going to be running out of time
Yes.
pretty quickly here, so this is going to be a mad dash through some of the paintings that came out of the time that I spent here. Oh, that was pretty fast, wow. That's all I did? No,
We can do this for 3 hours.
we
have
could,
cut
we're
a lot.
going to. You know, when I was a little guy, I opened up someone's closet. All my stories begin with me opening up somebody's closet, now that I think about it. There's a theme here.
Maybe that's why you like horror movies so
It
much.
could very well be, but there was a puzzle on their floor, and I thought, what is this? It's like, oh wow, this is the Silver War, which is what my cousin Mikey used to call it. Well, I realized now that it was the sort of like the central scene from the great Cyclorama painting, and that painting has been with me, you know, for 50 of my 56 years now. And so one of the treats being here was getting this behind the scenes look at this magnificent example of 1880s art. And I was like a kid in a candy shop. It was all I could do not to touch it. I'm just going to leave it at that. So here are some youngsters helping me paint the scene that we created specifically to give to the park. And I would, like I said before, I would just hand somebody a brush and say, pick up some of this paint right here and put it on that part of the canvas. And if somebody was a bit hesitant, most people would say, I'm sorry, I don't paint, or I can't draw a straight line, or whatever. I would take a little bit of paint and I would reach over my shoulder and tap it on the canvas, hoping that it landed somewhere that I wanted it to. But I just wanted to kind of set them at ease. And I always said, look, there's nothing you can do short of putting a hole in this that I can't fix. And technically I could probably do that.
You have had to.
And I have, actually, that's right. And we had folks from all over the world who stopped by over 2 consecutive Sundays, right here, right out in that entryway, if you will, who put paint on the canvas. And then we had them write their names in a little book. And
Which is right over there.
Yeah, in fact, if any of you happen to have put paint on the canvas, raise your hand. I'm curious to see. I know Chris did. Anybody else? No? Okay.
Chris Gwynn must have.
Chris Gwynn might have too. Okay. But it was a fun experience. Here they are, Pennsylvania, big surprise, Texas, Florida, Pakistan, you name it. And there it is. It's Fire on Little Round Top. Playing with the guys, I'm a kid. We're going to go quickly through this. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Although these are these cheap little things you get in a bag, for $9.99 you get a bunch of, blue and gray. And they're not the best toy soldiers ever made, but the price is right. And this started with me thinking I wanted to make a maquette to show the kids, look, as an artist, this helps me visualize the scene I'm going to paint. But it quickly devolved into me painting 150 toy soldiers and then photographing them. And one day I was out in the back of the Klingel farm setting up a little shot like this, and the guy went by on a bike and he said, I don't mean to be rude, but what are you doing? I said, well, I'm basically a 12-year-old trapped in a 50, blank-year-old man's body. But we talked for about an hour. He came in, checked out the house. He put paint on the canvas. And I just said, I'm sort of honoring the fact, or I'm connecting to that 12-year-old version of me who always wanted to get here. Didn't get here until I was in my mid-30s. But I can guarantee that the 12-year-old me would have been all over the toy soldiers. So this was a way of sort of coming full circle and having a little bit of fun with it.
And guess where he went yesterday on the first day here?
Well, of course, I had to go, the miniature soldier shop. It's what you do. And then the grandkids, when they were out here, they're playing a battle. I found it very curious. Vincent was the one who was always rushing his men through the enemy lines, and the girls were taking pieces or tearing off little pieces of blades of grass and wrapping them around the men's shoulders and legs, trying to heal them. So there's something going on there. But they were fighting the battle of Gettysburg. And there's my dear wife in tears on our last day, leaving the house.
So let's see if I can get through this. As we were cleaning up after we left, and I was washing the floor on my hands and knees because it's a small floor, it's not that big a deal. And I just got this image of Hannah Klingel and what it must have been like a little bit. It's hard to even imagine, but it's called Blood on My Floor. Down on my knees, wiping up blood, with great sorrow I render this chore, wishing to God that the rag held only mud. A boy won't go home because his blood's on my floor. Somewhere in the south a mother waits for her son to walk through her door. Every day that he's gone, oh how her heart aches, but he won't be home. His blood's on my floor. Perhaps this young rebel was brave and wanted to fight even more, but instead he's been laid out in his grave. He won't get home because his blood's on my floor. I hug my baby so closely tonight and pray that there'll be no more war. The boy's mother doesn't yet know his plight, that he won't be home because his blood's on my floor. Okay. Well, after that cheery one.
Yeah, let's go to a different direction.
Are we ready for the
We,
next?
you know what, we actually are. Okay, now, we don't mean to offend anybody who in any way, shape, or form is connected to the ghost tours here in town. But it was a novelty for us, our first time years ago, and we realized, wow, there are a lot of ghost tours in Gettysburg. And every time we'd go to get a snack, somebody would be tapping you on the shoulder.
So, we thought it would be kind of fun to do a little more upbeat
Yes.
song. Very different than the others. All right. So.
We believe in contrast.
Well, I'm walking down the road in old Gettysburg. Yeah, I'm walking down the road in old Gettysburg. Someone taps me on the arm and says, won't you take a tour? 'Cause we've got ghosts to the left, spirits on our right. Yeah, we've got ghosts to our left, spirits on our right. Shadows in the alley on this summer night. Do you see her in the doorway? Is it Jenny Way? Oh, can you see her in the doorway? Is it Jenny Way? But I'll hold up this lantern, don't you be afraid. Well, I went downtown to get an ice cream cone. Yeah, I went downtown, buy me an ice cream cone. All I wanna do is lick it, please leave me alone. I've got the ghost tour blues here in Gettysburg. Yeah, I got the ghost tour blues here in Gettysburg. I want my spirits from this tavern, I don't want no tour. But you got ghosts to the left, spirits on our right. Yeah, we got ghosts to the left, spirits on our right. Shadows in the alley on this summer night.
And that, folks, is that. You've been really kind to let us
Yes.
ramble on so much, and I think I can speak for both of us when I say we're just so grateful to have had the opportunity to come out here and to be part of the Artists in Residence program, and then to be able to come back and share it with you folks. So it's been a dream.
Yes, 6 minutes.
6 minutes. Oh
We
my
could take
goodness.
questions, and if you want, you could.
Sure, why not? Let's see if I can
We'll
do
do a
this in
quick
6
sketch.
minutes.
And
Talk about pressure. Ugh.
we do school visits a lot, and like Chris told you, oops, I should probably get by this. Like Chris said earlier, I was a teacher for 38 years, and we still go to classes and do, especially performances of our B is for Battle Cry book, which I was supposed to say something about. I think we've got a copy. Oh, there it is.
Can folks see this, more or less?
Anyway, so this is the book that we have together, and we're going to the bookstore to do a signing after this. But when we do performances for students, we're in costume and we get them all involved and all. And then usually at the end, Dave does a quick sketch, and it's usually this quick too, so,
Well,
but they love seeing that.
Usually not this quick, but let's see what happens. This is not about creating a masterpiece. This is about trying to make 6th graders think you're really cool.
But if anyone has a question, we'd be happy to take them.
Oh boy, here we go. Creek.
Yes, yeah, right.
Was there anything too dramatic, poignant, deep that you started but you couldn't finish it because it was too much?
You know, I think I kept a big sketchbook notebook the whole time I was here, and I'm so glad I did, because I can see the evolution of things like the blood on my floor. My initial ideas, and this is like, oh, this sounds terrible, that kind of thing. I know that when I go back, I will find more things like that. It is. It's just horrific to even try to think about what happened here. But it's so important that we tell those stories, remember them. Does anybody want to know about if there were ghosts in the house? That was our big question back in Minnesota when we were doing the Civil War Roundtable. People wanted to know. And there is a logbook in the house for all the artisan residents who've stayed, and you can tell, reading different ones, some of them came down strongly on the side that there were definitely ghosts in the house, and others who said, oh, absolutely not. And if any place is going to be haunted, it would be a place like that, obviously. And we really didn't have anything. I was a little jumpy my first couple nights there.
I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, we actually, so, really didn't experience anything. There's those usual basement noises kind of things, and you get used to those. And then like 2 or 3 nights before we left, at 2 a.m, so we know there wasn't like a high school football game or something going on that would have made noises. We both heard boom, like an artillery, bombardment. Just a few times, but we both heard it, and it was, it wasn't really scary, but it just made us wonder, what in the world?
Whatever it was, it rattled me enough that it took me a long time to fall back asleep. And it happened several times.
Yeah.
And it was kind of irregular.
Yeah, and we both heard it.
Right, and so there's part of me that's thinking, well, there were, batteries of artillery to either side of the house.
Very close.
Anyhow.
Yeah. So anyway, that was our only experience. Yeah.
Okay.
You lived here for 5 months, is that right?
No, 5 weeks.
5 weeks,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
But still,
Yeah.
a long enough time to catch the spirit of the place, which we
Yeah.
could see in your visual art and in your poems
Yeah.
and songs.
Yeah.
What lesson does the Gettysburg experience have for America in 2020?
Oh my goodness.
That's a massive can of worms.
You want to start it out there with that?
Well,
I think, listening to stories and hearing
Yeah.
everybody's point of view, I guess that's always one of my things that I think is so important, is that you need to listen, yeah. What were you going to say?
I've been a licensed battlefield guide
Yeah.
here for a long time, and to me, it's saying, don't ever let this happen again.
Oh, yes.
This is what happens when Americans can't get along and
Yeah.
listen to each other.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
So I was just
Yes.
wondering, I
No,
thought
that's
I get
definitely,
that sense from
yeah,
art.
yeah, to me it's kind of, very obvious, and that they're, hold our babies closer and pray that there'll be no more war.
And it's
But-
too easy for, I should know better, it's easy for me to romanticize parts of this. In spite of everything I think I understand about it, I still can't help but feel this sort of draw, I use the word romanticism, I think we all agree, right? There's something there that you can easily allow yourself to feel. And then if I take the time to look at a photograph of a dead body on the field, and then think about where this person came from, the romance immediately evaporates. But I need to be reminded constantly. I think the country does too.
Do you have a favorite monument?
Oh, wow.
Of course, Minnesota's really important. That beautiful picture of the Pennsylvania monument in the morning that I had up there, Pennsylvania's pretty wonderful. I like the ones that are really active too. We were driving on Confederate Avenue yesterday. Dave, I'll be honest with you, I don't remember names and the battle things. To me, my great interest is kind of the human stories, and what was happening to the women and children and, all of that here. And the other stuff's very important, but it just doesn't stick with me as much.
Yeah.
And what?
Well, it might be one of the more active ones of the purely in terms of the sculpture, say,
Yeah.
it could be like a North Carolina, one of those, if I'm remembering correctly, the men are
Yeah, they're really,
dashing forward,
I like
purely from an
those a lot.
artistic standpoint.
Yeah.
There are just so many great ones out there. They
Yeah.
run the whole gamut in terms of style. I wouldn't even know how to answer it, yeah. Yeah, sometimes the simplest thing actually can speak volumes too, you know? And for me, that's the battlefield. It sounds
Oh,
highfalutin here, it sounds, but the battlefield in some ways feels like a monument too. And to be able to stand on a rise of ground and to look out over it and start to try to imagine what happened there. Curiously enough, what happens with me is I oftentimes don't feel any of it until I get home. And it's months later and I'm reading, Fonz's Second Day or whatever, any one of these. And it all starts to fall into place because I have more of a sense memory of walking the ground and yeah, so it's big, it's complex.
And when you talk about lessons too, especially as an educator, it's just so important. They don't have to know all the minutiae of things, but they need to understand what brought these forces together that they're fighting and why,
Right.
How did that happen? And, the old, we can't repeat, we don't want to repeat history, we need to understand it. And I definitely think that that is true. But I think that it's just so important that children and adults learn these things. I do get very tired of people say, oh, they don't teach kids history anymore. I get very tired of that. But because we do. And the problem is there are so many things going on in the world today and with kids that it's really difficult to focus on some of these things. I did it I used a lot of costumes, I used a lot of picture books, very active things. We made churned butter and we sang a lot and we did just so many things like that engage kids, because when they're used to playing video games and things like that, it makes it more difficult for teachers.
Oh, yeah.
To get all this stuff across. But it's important. And my big thing, I taught 6th grade and for a long time, and my idea was that I really want to get kids hooked on history so they keep wanting to learn about it. To me, that was one of my biggest goals, and I usually succeeded.
No, I know for a fact she did, because I was able to witness it, and it was spectacular. Showing up in costume and getting them hooked on the stories, the story part of history. Dates, yes, but the story, and hopefully they get hooked on story, and they start to see themselves potentially in the story. And
it's like Dave said with his...
want to know more.
Yeah, with the Gettysburg book, the McKinley Cantor. It may not have been the best history always, but the storytelling was wonderful and got him hooked so that he wanted to do more. The same with watching movies or, watching Daniel Boone as a kid or whatever. It makes you, the good thing is that if it gets you hooked so that you want to learn more.
That's right, yeah. So hopefully we've hooked a few people.
I think they were converts.
We tried. Yeah, you were already hooked.
Yeah.
There's a reason you put up with this, but whenever we encounter people, we're going to do a book sighting in a little while here, and so whenever we end up talking to families, you can just sort of see the spark in somebody's eye, and it's like, I think I know where this kid's going.
Yeah.
I saw a raised hand back. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how did your experience of 5 weeks change your art, or maybe it did or maybe it didn't, but what would you say to that?
I don't know if it changed my art so much as it gave me license to just, for 5 weeks, work on whatever I wanted to relative to a subject that's near and dear to my heart. But I was in a unique position to witness her not keeping me in the manner to which I've become accustomed for a change, and actually be able to focus on herself and to be able to write music and poems. And it just was such a moving experience to be upstairs putting paint on a canvas and she's singing about something relating to it, downstairs. So there was that, and then the connection to the house and the people that lived there. So that was huge. That really was. Yeah, that's, for me, was the biggest connection was seeing Pat become connected to the Klingel family and what happened there.
Well, it was the gift of time. and a place to be away, because I'm one of those people who never stops, and I'm always doing something, and I've got 5 little grandchildren close by, and I've got, all kinds of things happening all the time. And so for me to be able to have that time that let me just focus exclusively on that, besides taking care of him. But yeah, that was just such a gift.
High maintenance. Any other questions? Oh, right there, yes.
Are you planning on coming back somewhere down the road with another presentation?
We would love to be able to come back and do the artist in residence in 2021. As far as presentations, I don't know. Nobody's asked us. Minnesota's far away, but it's not that far away. And we love coming here. We love any excuse to come here.
They've used our book a number of times now with the children's program that they do, and it would be wonderful to come back and do our performance that we do with that.
Yeah.
Too bad we didn't get that coordinated before, but because they did our book, I think, in January, maybe.
I think they did, yeah. So, yeah, we'd love to come back and share whatever the next step might be or whatever. Yeah.
How long did it take you to paint your Minnesota chart?
Oh, the bigger one.
And did you do that all in your home in Minnesota?
I did it all in the home in Minnesota.
And in the Minnesota History Center, you had it up there.
Well, that's true. I would occasionally drag it out in public for social studies conferences, and people could come by and I could tell them about the charge and then show them the artistic process. So for me, it was a win-win. I get to talk about 2 things I'm fascinated with, and hopefully they were. And how long did it take me? Boy, I worked on it off and on for several months, doing other projects, because since it was a self-generated project, there's no money there, and so I had books to illustrate. And I will tell you this, I thought it was done. I signed it, we framed it, we brought it out here. We were part of 70 Minnesotans that came out to rededicate the Minnesota, on the anniversary of the charge. And I looked out over the field from the Pennsylvania Monument and thought, oh man, I got the hills wrong. And those Alabamans need to move. And so I went home, and I'm not kidding, I literally took a house painting brush and dipped it in some paint and wiped out a few areas. So I can say, in all honesty, that I took out an entire regiment of Alabamans. And perhaps 5 seconds. And the 1st Minnesota couldn't do that. And then I had to basically break out all this stuff and have at it again. Yeah, so, but I hate to dodge giving you, I feel like a politician, to give you a specific answer, because I really don't know. Yeah, these things just go on forever and ever. This thing, I'll be in my 70s by the time this No, hopefully we'll be done this summer, actually. So. Chris is going to have a cow if we don't get out of here. Are we doing okay, Chris?
Yeah, you get time for one more.
Oh, okay, there we go, one more.
I did.
Hey, hi, how are you? Sorry. Yes.
Super quick one.
Yeah.
That was a fascinating technique. I know nothing about art, to be honest. But
sometimes I don't either.
You have your friend Jeff, I think you said his name?
Yes, exactly.
And all these poses.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad you find that.
One of those gentlemen, Jeff? Do you use his face in one of those?
I'm trying to. The one who did them all was
Jack was the man back in the Twin Cities who did it.
Yeah.
And then we had two, or actually three people. We even had another ranger came by one day and I.
Oh, okay. So they weren't all the same.
No. And I shoved a cappy or a forage cap in his head and said, "Don't move." He was coming out to check the condition of the Klingel farm. He's pushing his finger in the wood and I said, "Oh, you look great. Come over here." Yeah, you got to be careful. One of these days I'm going to ask somebody to come in and see my paintings, and it's not going to go well, so I got to be careful. All right. Thank you so much. Thanks.
And if you want to check out at some point and see when this is finished, you can go to Dave's website. Just Google David Geister. We've got some bookmarks up here as well. So check it out.
Yep. Thank you, folks. Hope to see you tomorrow for Angie Atkinson, who will be talking about the interstate slave trade. Thank you. Ooh.